You're standing on a beach 65,000 years ago. Behind you is everything you've ever known. In front of you is open ocean, no land in sight, no map, no compass, no boat that could survive what's out there. And somehow, your ancestors stepped in anyway. We found their descendants on the other side. We still have almost no idea how they got there. This is the story of the first ocean crossing in human history. Not Columbus. Not the Vikings. Not even the Polynesians. Someone did it 50,000 years before any of them, with tools made of stone and wood, no written language, no navigation charts, and no guarantee that anything existed on the other side of that water. And we know they succeeded, because their descendants are still alive today. Let's start with the problem. Modern humans evolved in Africa. For most of our existence, we were landlocked. Walking, hunting, following animals across plains and through forests. We were not ocean people. We didn't grow up near deep water. We had no evolutionary reason to build boats capable of deep-sea crossings. And yet, at some point, someone did exactly that. The first hard evidence comes from Australia. We know humans arrived there at least 65,000 years ago, possibly earlier. At a site called Madjedbebe in the Northern Territory, archaeologists found stone tools, pigment, and grinding stones buried under layers of ancient earth. The dating pushed human presence in Australia back further than almost anyone expected. The scientific community argued about it for years. The dates kept holding. Here's the problem that number creates. Even during the Ice Age, when sea levels were dramatically lower than today, Australia was never connected to mainland Asia. There was always open water. Not a little. At minimum, 90 kilometers of open ocean, completely out of sight of land on both sides. To get there, the first Australians didn't wade across a shallow crossing or follow a coastline. They built something that could carry them across deep, open, featureless sea. And then they did it. We've never found the boats. That's the thing that keeps archaeologists up at night. Wood rots. Bark rots. Reed bundles rot. Whatever they used to cross, it's gone. We have the tools they made on the other side. We have their bones. We have their art. Some of the oldest known rock paintings in the world, found in Australia, made by people who had already been there for thousands of years by the time European civilization was getting started. But the vessel that carried the first humans across 90 kilometers of open ocean vanished completely. What we can do is estimate. Experimental archaeologists have built replicas using only materials available 65,000 years ago. Bamboo, bark, vines, wood. These rafts float. They're stable enough for calm water. But the crossing to Australia wasn't calm water. It was the open ocean. That means they either got lucky with conditions, or they understood the sea well enough to wait for the right winds and currents. Both possibilities say something remarkable about who these people were. For context, 65,000 years ago, humans hadn't yet invented pottery. We hadn't domesticated a single animal. Most of our tools were still made from stone. And someone in that world looked at the open ocean and figured out how to cross it. But Australia wasn't the only impossible crossing. In 2003, researchers working on the Indonesian island of Flores made a discovery that rewrote the timeline again. They found remains of a tiny hominin, a human relative, that had been living on Flores for hundreds of thousands of years. Flores has never been connected to the mainland. Not during the Ice Age. Not ever. Whatever reached that island, reached it by water. Long before modern humans existed. Then modern humans arrived on Flores too. They crossed the same stretch of open water, settled the island, and lived there alongside these smaller relatives for thousands of years before the smaller species disappeared. We don't fully know what happened. We know modern humans were there. We know the other species vanished shortly after. And we know that two completely separate crossings to an island with no land bridge happened, one hundreds of thousands of years ago, one tens of thousands of years ago, and both required something crossing open water on purpose. Here's where it gets stranger. When geneticists began mapping ancient DNA across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, they found something nobody predicted. Modern Aboriginal Australians carry genetic traces of an ancient population that isn't related to any other group on Earth. A lineage so old and so isolated that it separated from every other human population around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago and stayed that way. These people didn't just cross the ocean once. They stayed. They built a civilization on an isolated continent and kept it running for 60,000 years. Longer than any other continuous human culture we've identified anywhere on the planet. 60,000 years. For context, the Roman Empire lasted about 500 years. Ancient Egypt, one of history's most enduring civilizations, lasted roughly 3,000 years. The culture that began when the first humans crossed to Australia and survived unbroken until European contact is 20 times older than ancient Egypt. So who were these people? What kind of human looks at 90 kilometers of open water with no knowledge of what's on the other side and decides to cross it? The honest answer is that they were exactly like you. Same brain, same capacity for fear, curiosity, planning, and hope. The cognitive revolution, the shift that gave humans language, symbolic thinking, and the ability to plan for futures that hadn't happened yet, occurred roughly 70,000 years ago. These weren't primitive minds making a desperate, accidental crossing. They were modern human minds making a calculated decision. They watched the currents. They tracked the stars. They probably saw birds flying in a consistent direction and followed the logic. They built something. They loaded it with people and supplies. They left. Some of them didn't make it. We'll never know how many crossings failed before one succeeded. How many rafts capsized in open water. How many people drowned within sight of the shore they left and never reached the shore they were aiming for. The ones who made it left no record of the ones who didn't. What they left instead was everything. A continent settled. Culture built. 60,000 years of unbroken human presence on a landmass the rest of the world didn't know existed. Rock art older than Stonehenge by tens of thousands of years. Languages, stories, and knowledge systems that carried the memory of Ice Age coastlines so accurately that modern geologists used Aboriginal oral traditions to locate ancient submerged landscapes. They remembered the world before the sea level rose. They passed that memory down for 10,000 years through story alone. And when researchers went looking for what those stories described, they found it, underwater, exactly where the stories said it would be. We think of ocean crossing as a feat of technology. Ships, navigation, instruments. The first ocean crossing had none of that. It had something older and harder to engineer. It had people willing to leave everything behind and move toward something they couldn't see, because something in them understood that the horizon wasn't the end of the world. It was just where the world became new.